equation. And then you come up with the total current using the overall. Alright? Then you go to your chart, but you have to know your characteristics of circuits. You got to know, alright, series, they all get the same current. Parallel, they all get the same voltage. Work from there. Okay? Next class, so Tuesday, we'll look at combination circuits. So combination circuits would be circuits that have both series and parallel elements in the same circuit. Okay? If you don't know these facts that I gave you today, you will not be able to do that, period. Even though the math is really easy, you won't be able to do it. You have to know the characteristics of those circuits to be able to do this. Okay, so make sure you study that carefully. If there's anything you got to know about circuits, it's this stuff I gave you today, the notes. Alright, super, super important. If you think about our houses, right, our houses are typically wired, and pretty much everything in your house except for a switch is wired in parallel. Okay? If you think about why that is, several reasons, but one is, if you wired things up in series, let's suppose like your bedroom was on a circuit. Like the outlets and lights in your bedroom were on one circuit. If it were wired in series, then in order for you to be able to use any device, every device would have to be on and plugged in at the same time. If you turned one thing off or unplugged one thing, the entire circuit would go dead. So you would never be able to operate one device independently of others. Can't do that in series. So that makes it pretty impractical. Okay? But there's a trade-off. So we wire our houses up in parallel. That allows us to operate devices independently of each other. That's a good thing. But the trade-off is, if you start hooking up more things, or I plug in another device, or I turn on another light, or whatever, you're adding another thing in the circuit. Look at what that does here. It decreases the total resistance. So think about this. If the total resistance goes down, then that means the current goes up. So you keep hooking up more and more stuff, turning more and more things on. Eventually, you're going to be pulling a whole lot of current through the circuit. And the more current you pull through the circuit, the more current you pull through the wire, the more chance there is of those wires getting hot and burning up. That's why we have circuit breakers, or fuses, because they will limit the amount of current that will pass through them. So each circuit in your house is connected to a circuit breaker in the panel. All right, I showed you guys the circuit breaker last time. That will only allow the rated amount of amps to pass through it and no more. So most of them are 15 amps or 20 amps. So as long as the current flowing through the wire stays under that number, it's like a closed switch and it just works normally. All right, but as soon as it goes past that rating, 15 amps or whatever, it shuts off the circuit. All right, because you don't want more than 15 amps of current to pass through this kind of wire. It can't handle it. It's going to start getting way too hot, burn up. The wires are in the walls, you can't see them, so it causes a fire, you can't see it, and then bad things happen. All right, so it helps to protect us from an overload when you hook up too many things in the circuit. You might have experienced this before. When you run certain devices in your house, or you hook up too many things, or you might have blown a circuit breaker before and you had to go back and switch it and trip the circuit breaker. Okay. People have done really foolish things, like they have a particular circuit in their house where it trips all the time. So they're like, well, a circuit breaker only costs $7, $7, $8, so I'm going to go to Home Depot and buy a 20 amp circuit breaker instead of the 15 amp that's in there, because it'll allow me to have 20 amps instead of 15 amps. That's a really dumb idea. All right, because if you change the circuit breaker out to a 20 amp breaker, the wires can still only handle 15 amps, but now you're allowing it to carry 20. chances of a fire in your house have gone up substantially. All right, the only way you can fix the circuit is to change the circuit itself, change the wiring somehow, which is a pain, not convenient, because you gotta open the walls up, all right, and change the wiring. It's the only way to make it safe if you want to stop it from tripping all the time. Okay, if you think about it, old houses weren't designed to have all these electrical devices on. All right, my house was built in 1924. How many things did you plug in your house in 1924? Think about it. There's no television. You may have owned a radio. What else did you have that plugged in? Not many things. All right? So, you know, people get mad all the time, like, you know, how come these electricians wired this house this way? Well, they can't read the minds of the future 100 years down the road and think about, well, you know, in 100 years, people are going to have phones that they carry in their pocket and they charge them with a battery. Like, you don't know that. So, it's really hard for them to figure that part out. Do you have a question?
No, I might have, but then I forgot it.
You forgot. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to be posting a reading based on what we did today on Series and Parallel. There will be a worksheet that goes with that. We need to do some practice with this. On Tuesday, we're going to do combination circuits, and we're going to talk about Kirchhoff's laws. And then Thursday, we'll finish up. Thursday will be our last day of instruction, regular instruction. Okay. On Thursday, I'm going to give you an assignment to take home on electricity and circuits. That's going to be counted for a grade. You'll bring it back the following Monday, our next class. And then, wait, I said what it is. Monday, yeah. So we will start our review for the AP test, not next week, but the following Monday. We will start. I'm going to look at my calendar and see, I'm probably going to plan on doing a weekend review session, probably be a Sunday. It's optional, but I'll try to pick a time and a day that the most of you can make it to. We'll try to get together and do some stuff there too, but we'll be reviewing the class as well.
Let's have a picnic.
Picnic?